Hey everybody, Tobiah here. I wanted to apologize for the recording quality of this episode. Unfortunately, about like a third or halfway in, my microphone stopped working. So you can only really hear me through the echo of Lat's microphone. But I wanted to release this episode anyway because the interview was really, really good, and you could hear Lat's side. And I tried to edit it as much as possible that it was, but there's only so much that I can do. So I apologize for the worst quality of this episode, and I hope that you enjoy it anyway. Hello, and welcome to Beanie Now, a podcast about independent game development. I'm your host, Tobiah Marks, and with me today is Lat Ware. Hey, Lat.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be here.
Why do you make games?
You might as well ask, why do I breathe? I have been basically obsessed with games since I was very little, concerned my parents a little bit. And I knew from a very early age, about middle school, that I knew that I wanted to make video games when I grew up.
When did you first make a game? Approximate, doesn't have to be exact. Like, were you really, really young, you're messing with something? Like, when would you start coding?
I would say that I picked that up and first made a very crappy game when I was 16. And I went to DigiPen Institute of Technology's summer camp, where you work with a team for a week or so and make a game.
Now, were you in the Washington area? Or?
I lived in North Carolina and went to the Washington area for that, and I knew that I needed to go to college there. So, fortunately, I got accepted. And that was a fantastic experience that I would not wish on my worst enemy. It properly acquaints you with all the worst sides of the games industry, and if you don't love game development, you will hate it.
Is it more so that that turns out people who belong in the AAA industry kind of thing, where you're churning out like the same old, working on a large part of the team? It's not indie development. Like, what do you mean by that exactly?
It's more that when you do game development, it becomes very all-consuming to your life. If
Crunch time, hardcore, staying up late.
For large portions of the startup, I was working 80 hours a week.
Yeah, that's not sustainable. I've been there. I've often voluntarily done 80, 90-hour work weeks, but since I've stopped, I realize, I work better with a 60-hour work week. I get more done.
Yeah, but that's the thing with game developers is they love the work so much. So they often end up doing it to themselves. And
yeah, it's a very voluntary thing.
And when you're working at a company where everyone is doing this voluntarily, you basically have to. No one's explicitly saying that you'll be fired if you don't, but you still have to.
Yeah, it's the culture of what's around you.
And DigiPen properly trains you for dealing with that. I had large stretches where I work constantly on a project for 2 days, just finish it, turn it in, and then I start the next project, which is due the end of the next day. And that just repeated for months. And what I notice with a lot of indie game developers is that if they don't keep that sort of pace, it's because it's very hard for game developers to do anything besides all or nothing, it doesn't get done. And if they don't.
Yeah, there's definitely this culture around I'll get my prototype half out there, or I'll work on it, and then I kind of take it off to the side. And if I don't strike when the iron's hot, if I don't strike when I'm having the most passion about it, where I'm willing to stay up all night, every night, and get it out there as soon as possible, a lot of people just can't get it out there at all. There's very few exceptions to that rule. I think Fez is an interesting exception to that because they took years working that game, and they were probably doing a lot of late nights at it because that game had a lot of work to it.
I love that game.
It was very different than a lot of indie games because of how long it took. Very few indie games, are able to have 2-3 people work on it for 4+ years. It's a crazy long amount of time.
That and significantly more polished than most indie games are.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, those years showed off. So what year did you graduate?
I graduated class of 2007.
All right. So what happened after that?
Well, I got a job at a serious game studio in North Carolina,
Mm-hmm.
making training simulations for first responders to various disasters using Unreal Engine 3.
That sounds really fun, actually.
And really interesting educational experience, and giving you all these options that are available to you that are relevant to the disaster, and also things like, oh, lots of really interesting medical details. For example, there's 2 treatments for cyanide poisoning. One of them will kill you if you don't have cyanide poisoning.
Interesting.
And so in the scenario where there's a hydrogen cyanide gas attack on a subway, there's one patient who has symptoms of or is suffering from a panic attack, not actually any poisoning. And if you use the wrong treatment on it, you'll kill him and fail the assignment.
Man, that is a really, really cool project. That sounds really
It
interesting.
was really cool. Well, and then after that, I got a job at Cryptic Studios in Los Gatos.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. I was working on Champions Online, and then we got moved over to the Star Trek Online team. That was fun. And then I got a job in Scotland, working for Real Time Worlds on All Points Bulletin. My condolences to all of you who actually recognize that name.
I remember that game, but man, that's really interesting that you've had.
It had so much potential.
That's not only a variety of types of game, but that's a big variety of types of work environments. How was it to transition from like North Carolina games industry to Bay Area to Scotland? I mean, were they similar?
Basically, it just kept getting more and more casual.
Interesting. So, like, what do you mean by casual? Is it just casual in the way people talked, dressed, acted, showed up to work?
There was a rigid hierarchy at the North Carolina office. Cryptic, it was more soft, and a low-level person could argue with one of the directors, and not oftentimes, but periodically, they won the argument and got major game decisions in. And then at Real Time Worlds, it was, there was a tremendous amount of freedom for what you could do for the game, and then some oversight. Right? For example, originally the reticle was not an accurate representation of your bullet spray in the game, and I spent a week hacking away at that, making it an accurate representation, and showed it to my lead, and he said, "Oh, that's awesome! Put it in."
Nice.
And
Seems like a better way to run a studio to have input from everybody. I mean, granted, you can't have everything be chaos. You can't have everyone have complete control. There's got to be some structure of you need to get this done.
it can't be an army of cowboy coders.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, to be frank, that's what the problem with Half-Life 3, I think, still hasn't come out. Is that I hear that Valve doesn't necessarily do that. But, at the same time, they make some of my favorite games of all time because they are allowed to focus on whatever aspect they want to polish over and over again.
Like, yeah, Valve is amazing at producing the fun games, but I think that has to do with the fact that they only make games that they're excited about. Like, we've all played a AAA game where you can tell that the developers really weren't that excited about it. And there's no one thing about it that shows, but it's just the whole tone of the entire thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard when you have hundreds of people working on a project for 18 plus months to be able to, continue to be excited every day or even just see the vision of it all coming together. Because oftentimes the game, by the time it's playable and you get kind of an idea of what it's going to be about, it's pretty much too late. It's about the ship. It better be fun at that point.
Has to do with the really critical deadlines. And also part of why we made Throw Trucks with Your Mind as a multiplayer game first, because that's where we can constantly tune the gameplay, right? And then after that we can fill out single player content.
So let's talk about Throw Trucks. How did that start?
Well, after the time in Scotland, I needed a break from game development because, as much as I love it, it is emotionally draining to work on something and then see it flop. So I got a job at InView, which is a social networking company in the Mountain View area, and worked there happily for about 2 years before quitting to create my startup. Yep. And the origin of throw trucks goes back to when I was 6 and saw Star Wars for the first time. And I've wanted to be a Jedi ever since. Then, when I was 13, I did neurofeedback therapy for my ADD, where you hook a bunch of electrodes up to your head and use that to read your brainwaves, and from a display on screen, and you learn to control your brainwaves to mitigate the disorder. I knew that I needed to use this to make the ultimate Star Wars game.
So you were just trying to balance the wavelengths. How would they be visualized to you?
Well, a therapy technique for treating ADD that I used was increasing the strength of your beta waves and decreasing the strength of your theta waves. So I basically had 2 meters on screen. I was trying to make a one-wave pattern big and one-wave pattern small.
And that's interesting. It's like flexing a muscle that most people don't think about.
That's actually the best way to think of it, because once you know that it exists and you've got this feedback, you can replicate the effect very easily.
And so you have a device that's strapped to your head to detect this.
Yeah, it was a giant helmet of sensors, and it was using contact gel, which is really gross, and the whole setup cost like $100,000.
But that's not what you did for throw trucks. You worked with NeuroSky.
Yes, when I was 20, NeuroSky really. Crap, that was 10 years ago. I was not prepared for that. NeuroSky had a demo at the Game Developers Conference where they had this little EEG headset that had one sensor to touch your forehead, one sensor that clips onto your ear, no contact gel, no calibration step. You just put it on people and it works. And that was hooked up to the Half-Life 2 engine, and people were running around in multiplayer, and you could push things by focusing and lift things by being calm. And I knew that I needed to use this to make the ultimate Star Wars game. I mean, this was finally going to be what let me do it.
Doing that force mind control stuff, manipulating objects, telekinesis.
Always wanted to alter the world through the sheer force of my will. I asked them when they were going to release that game, because I think, this is great, I'll just take it and mod it. And they said never, because it was just a tech demo and they are a hardware platform company. So I said, okay. When are you going to... hey, can I make a game like this? They said they'd be very happy for me to. And then I asked how much for the dev kit. It was $5,000 at the time, which made my heart sink because I was a starving college student. But I took the idea away in the back of my mind, and for later. And about 4 years ago, NeuroSky released the commercial version of their headset, which only cost $100 each. I immediately bought 2 and started development.
Yeah, because $100 is such a practical cost. That makes it so much more accessible.
Yeah, ultimately the pricing needs to be less or $60 bundled with a game.
Yeah,
because if you're going to reach the traditional retail market, because you need a really powerful marketing campaign or powerful word of mouth in order to overcome I could put put $100 down, or I could put $60 down and buy this AAA game that I know I'm going to like. Like Guitar Hero pulled it off, but they pulled it off because they had a demo station in every Best Buy and Walmart.
Yeah, not only the demo station, but they're kind of selling the Rock Band experience, which is something that people understand implicitly. They don't need to be shown to know, hey, you can be a rock star. You just need to be shown you will feel like a rock star with this plastic guitar in your hand.
Because everyone does air guitar.
But not everyone understands you can be a Jedi.
Well, a lot of people actually don't believe that the tech is real until I sit them down and have them play it.
Oh, what do you mean by not really think like it won't work very well, won't be as accurate?
Most people say, oh my God, I can't believe this is actually working. I mean, because I've got this handy meter on screen telling you how calm you are and how focused you are, and they say, well, this can't possibly work. And then they focus on something, and then they see the meter go up, and like, whoa, that actually does work.
Yeah, I mean, I guess people, I remember playing in like a Fry's back in like the 90s of like a
Hmm.
little brainwave thing or something. You like stick your finger in and it will tell you how excited you are. And they're always really wonky, but that tech has iterated and has gotten better and better and more accurate. And I played the game a couple weeks ago and I kind of had the same experience where I was like, oh, wow, I feel more calm. I can easily control this. I can easily make myself more focused or not focused, and it works exactly how I behaved it would.
And on the subject of a muscle you didn't know you had, the more you play it in the game, the better you get at being calm and focused in stressful situations.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of a violent competitive meditation trainer.
Violent competitive meditation trainer. That's a very interesting title. Why violent?
Well, because people like to crush other people with their brains. They like feeling better than other people. And competition is a very easy motivator to tap into.
Mm-hmm.
When you get into a battle of wills in the game with someone else and overpower them, the object you're fighting over goes flying into them and crushes them. It feels awesome because you know that you are more powerful.
That is interesting. Yeah, that is. There's kind of a therapeutic angle to it where it's not necessarily like this will make people better, but you can definitely see it being a good muscle to exercise people and something that, when it coupled with actual therapy, will help somebody.
I've definitely noticed that the regular play of the game has helped me a tremendous amount with the stresses involved in running a startup.
Mm-hmm.
2 years ago, this would have broken me. Hey, hey, and also the focus side of things. I 5 years ago, I would have found it impossible to do any work in a friendly local coffee shop because of all the noise, and now I can just tune it out without any problems.
That's really cool. So, you're making this game. How did you start getting funding?
Well, I started off by trying to raise venture capital funding. And well, I went for that because it's the narrative that we hear a lot about in Silicon Valley. Like you partner up with a venture capitalist, they hear the brilliance of your idea, they love what you're doing, and everything just works perfectly from there.
Yeah, they give you buckets of money and you can do whatever you want. Doesn't quite work that way.
It's more accurate to say that venture capitalists will give you money when you can prove that you don't need it.
Oh, that's a really good point because they're looking for profit. They're looking for profitability. So when you prove that you don't need the money, you're a profitable business, that's when people want to invest in you because they're going to make their investment back.
Mm-hmm. Also, venture capitalists are rarely investing their own money. For the most part, they're actually investing things like other people's pension funds. And so their ass is on the line for every single decision they make, and they need the guaranteed return.
Mm-hmm.
And because catastrophe happens if they don't invest well.
Yeah.
So
They can't just invest in a random experiment.
yeah, and when you know that, it becomes very obvious that the narrative that you hear in Silicon Valley just doesn't correspond to reality. And it took me about 4 months to realize that, which is longer than it should, but...
So then the next step was Kickstarter.
Yeah, the main feedback I was getting was that I needed to prove that there was actual demand for this. So I started a Kickstarter with the goal of raising $40,000. And that was incredibly hard and also depressing. We raised $47,000. More than 2/3 of the donations came from people who had actually played the game.
You were just going around to people and showing to them physically.
I was going to every meetup group that I could that had the entrepreneur tag.
Mm-hmm.
And I was saying, here, play this game. And demoing for 30 to 50 people for 2 to 4 meetups. 30 to 50 people per event and 2 to 4 events per night. Right? No breaks.
Oh, that sounds really intense.
I'm a pretty severe introvert. And as soon as I hit the goal of $40,000, I just curled up into a ball on my living room floor and didn't really move the rest of the day.
At what point in the campaign did you hit it?
It was like 4 days before the end of it. It. I've come to realize that due to a lot of really, really good Kickstarters that have been run lately, the bar has been significantly raised for what's expected from a Kickstarter. And at this point, basically, Kickstarter can only fund a game that's already been made. Because you need to have all that to show for it.
You got a Kickstarter, you were funded 4 days to go.
And I curl up into a ball. Well, I did a couple more events, but it was really hard to keep going.
How many people are on your team?
5.
How did you meet those people? How did that happen? How did you get that organized?
They are people. They're fellow graduates of DigiPen Institute of Technology. Mm-hmm. One of them left for a job at a more established studio, and we picked up someone else who is not a graduate of DigiPen, and he's been great. But for most of the company's history, it was run entirely by. It was composed entirely of DigiPen students, or rather graduates. Because I've been through that gauntlet, and I know the quality of people that people have to be in order to actually graduate.
These are graduates that went to school at the same time as you?
1 year before me, actually, or after me.
So there was overlap. You knew them as students.
Yeah, not really friends with them, but knew of them.
So what were they doing during the Kickstarter? Your partners.
What were they doing? Well, Caspian was managing a lot of the social media stuff for me. He's fantastic at that. He also did a bunch of the promotional materials, which I really appreciate because if the Kickstarter didn't go through, I would not have had the money to pay him. Matt was also doing promotion, and the other two don't really like to do much front-facing stuff, so I don't ask them to. I found that it's best happy people are way more productive. So
you succeeded, you got the funding, you got overfunded by $7,000. What happened next?
Well, that actually wasn't enough, and I knew that from the very beginning. And the intention was to use that to prove that there was a
market and demand for it.
Mm-hmm.
So much better to go to investors and say, look, I had this many people and this many $1,000 handed to me already. I just need X many more to finish it.
Mm-hmm. And I was able to raise an additional $240,000 or so. Because of the Kickstarter. That's a risky move, and I don't recommend it to anyone because while this has not hit the courts yet, the Kickstarter campaign can be considered a legally binding contract, which can hit you with a class action lawsuit if you fail to deliver.
Interesting. Well, I mean, there's always like those risks in it, and so people kind of get this idea that Kickstarter is pre-purchasing, and they don't really understand a lot of artistic projects and the development and how stuff might change and issues that go in, especially when stuff takes multiple years in order to be, work and, be designed well and actually be playable.
Mm-hmm. I actually had a hard time getting the Kickstarter rewards out to all of my backers because a lot of them just after they backed, flagged Kickstarter mails as spam.
So you needed to get them to fill out a survey or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just getting people to respond back, imagine, is difficult. What were people backing? Were your rewards you get a NeuroSky kit plus this or?
Well, the $5 reward was that you got or you got your name in the credits.
Mm-hmm.
It's provided the name you enter doesn't change the ESRB rating. Then, and at $15 you got one of the promotional posters. $25 you get a copy of the game. And at At $75, you get a zip file of all the concept art that went into the game. And at $125, you get the game and headset. At $150, well, each reward is everything below it.
Yeah.
At $150, you get to send in a picture of you, which would appear as a portrait in the museum level.
That's a really tight profit margins, because you're talking about a headset that retails for $100.
Yes.
To sell that for $125 with a poster, with your game,
It was
with the Kickstarter fees.
It was an error in judgment, and I should have been asking for a lot more. And a very important thing when running a Kickstarter is watch your profit margins.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because, well, you can easily lose. There's half of the money you get to fulfilling the rewards. And shipping fees will sneak up on you.
Yeah, totally. That makes a lot of sense.
Then at $200, sorry, about the portraits, those are dynamic physics objects in the level. So those few people who gave that at a reward level have the rare privilege of beating someone to death with a portrait of themselves.
Nice.
At $200, people could give us a small object a concept that we would put in the game and do iterative work on the concept art back and forth to get exactly what they wanted. $300 was a medium-sized object, $400 was a large object, and $500 was a massive object.
So how many people did those higher-end reward levels?
I forget. It was over 10 for the small objects and under 10 for the massive objects.
All right, so not too many.
The massive objects were special class of object that are so heavy they take 2 people to get moving, but if you hit someone with them, they're an instant kill. At $750, ours was just an experimental idea of you get to have lunch with the dev team.
Mm-hmm.
No one took us up on that, but I'm not surprised. We're not celebrities. It was but worth a shot.
Fair enough. You have that higher end option too, just to make the lower end one sound appealing. Like, oh, I'm not going to spend $750 on this game, but I might spend $125.
At $1,000, people could give us the high concept for a character, and we'd put that character in the game. One person took us up on that, and they asked for a dragon in the game, which it took a lot of iterative work to figure out how to put a dragon that still fit the art style of the game in,
mm-hmm.
and we ended up with this baby dragon named Francis.
That sounds really awesome.
He's adorable.
That sounds like it improves the game right there.
It does. And it was in the description, and I was just throwing out random ideas of things you could put in, and one of them was your cat in a robot suit. And after I said that, Caspian and said, Lat, if no one buys that reward, we have to put that in the game.
Cat in a robot suit.
Yeah, Baron Cornelius von Meowsworth is our favorite. Is our most popular character by far.
Nice.
Then at the $3,000 level, they could give us the high concept for a level, and we'd make that level for them.
Anyone take you up on that?
One person did. That's where the Monster Truck Arena is from.
Very cool. So you got the funding from Kickstarter. You got funding from venture capitalists. That was almost 2 years ago now.
Angel investors, actually.
Sorry, angel investor. What happened next? How's the game going? Where is it at now?
We officially launched the game April 1st, 2014, which is the same day that we promised it would be released by. Kind of a poorly chosen date. If I had to do it again, I would make it April 2nd.
Because everyone thought it was a joke?
Yeah. The official date that the company first started doing business was April 1st. Everyone's hire date, April 1st. Our big milestone, on April 1st. So we've been slamming out patches as for that ever since. I think we're on patch 60-something from the original patch 1 release. We're working on making the Mac build work better. We're also working on The Mac build's currently in alpha because there's two critical issues with it, which we don't really understand what's going wrong, and we're working on it. Particles don't draw correctly, and you can't save keybinds. And and and, and the the Windows build is currently available in beta. You can buy both from throwtrucks.com. We have a firm policy that you buy the game once, it's yours on all platforms. So
That's nice. That's much appreciated, actually. It's always annoying to have to rebuy games multiple times.
Well, we have some improvements to make to the game before we call it out of beta. Specifically, that's on the matchmaking front. Right now, we have our own matchmaking system that, lets you. The matchmaking system. The matchmaking system uses a NAT punch-through setup, so you can join and host games without doing any of the port forwarding stuff, and that's our solution to not being able to afford official servers yet. Though we are looking into running official servers.
So, what's the next year look like? Is it just fixing up these bugs, getting it out, polishing the game?
Well, as soon as we get the matchmaking fixes out, we're going to release the game on Steam.
Go for as wide of audience as possible.
It's a multiplayer focused game, and a big problem right now is that there's a shortage of players. So, there's 3,000 people who've pledged to buy the game on Steam, which should be enough to let you always find a game at peak hours. Whereas my math says I need about 20,000 users to always be able to find a game.
Yeah, because you have this problem where everyone needs to have one of these mind-reading devices, and that severely limits the potential audience size.
Yeah, it's a small market right now. After the Steam release, our top priority is getting out some single-player content. We're currently working on puzzle mode, basically inspired by Portal.
That sounds really cool.
Oh.
I could see moving around objects and solving puzzles. That's a really, really fun activity by myself.
And using your powers to escape a level.
That sounds great.
Well, then there is. Then after that, cooperative puzzle mode. We do have a PvE mode to the game right now, which is called Hunt the Hunters, where you and your friends fight a team of computer-controlled bots. The enemy team size is the same size as your team, and instead of having psychic powers, these robots have guns, because it's really hard to keep your common focus when someone's shooting at you.
Nice.
Oh, and so
Kind of a man versus machine mode.
And that's the basic AI mode, or that's the basic AI prototype. So we'd also like to have a single-player campaign where you work your way through tons of enemies. But we have to work to do what gets us the most returns right now. So for that, it's the matchmaking fixes, Steam release, and then puzzle mode.
How many people are on the team still?
5.
So is it all of you are doing it full-time, and you're able to support yourselves with the angel funding? Are people having secondary jobs?
We are all full-time employees.
That's awesome. That's really great you're able to do that.
I have made some sacrifices for making sure that the company works. I wasn't paid until about May or so of this year, and I spent a good 8 months sleeping on people's couches. Because I had to give up my apartment and threw all my stuff in storage.
Living the indie dream, just it reduces costs as much as possible to be able to make the game.
Yeah, it's a bit more American Mickey's Alice than Alice in Wonderland.
Funny comparison there. So, speaking of which, if I gave you a time machine, you can go back to yourself at, we'll say 2012, right, when you're starting this project. What would you tell yourself?
That I'm an idiot, and that I don't know anything, and that I should approach everything from that standpoint.
So you think that you felt like you knew more about what was going on.
I thought I was in a very 19-year-old mentality of thinking that I knew everything when I knew nothing. And well, that's why I was spent 4 months beating my head against a wall trying to raise venture capital funding when there was no way that it was ever going to happen. And I, like I should have had hired a full-time salesperson and paid them on commission as a percent of the Kickstarter.
That's just to have more people on the ground showing off the game. Are you looking to get like salespeople now once the game is, once you have the single player mode ready, once you're ready for mass appeal, are you going to try and recruit salespeople and
Absolutely.
get it into Best Buy?
That's another thing. I'm an engineer by trade, and when I started off, this is embarrassing, I thought that engineers were the ones who did all the work, and marketers took credit for that.
Marketing is absolutely a necessary field.
I didn't understand the need for business for MBAs. As I felt like designers just told the engineers what to do. No, every single bit of that is a crucial piece of the machine. If you miss any one part, it's not going to work.
And there has been companies that work without those people, and how they work is that one person acts multiple roles.
Yeah.
They act as the marketer, they act as the designer, they act as the engineer, they act as the producer.
Yeah, and I was surprised to find out that I'm terrible at marketing.
Now, you're surprised because you assume that, this is something that's easy I can handle before, or...
Well, I thought, do you want to crush people with your brain? Would sell itself. It doesn't.
Yeah, very, very, very few things sell itself. Even really stuff that sells itself, you still have to push it out there. You can have the best game of all time, and no one's going to hear about it in today's marketplace unless you really market it and push it.
Well, yeah, and if you look at the things that appear to sell themselves and look closely, there was a recent Kickstarter which raised over $500,000. And I looked into it, and their programmer designer is also a writer for a dozen or so online and gaming magazines. So
there
that
you go.
person had all this time to build up the perfect press storm, and then when the Kickstarter launches, simultaneously all these major gaming magazines and say, "Oh my God, this thing is amazing! You need to check it out," and that hit the critical mass of everyone is talking about this. Everyone is going to visit it.
And even if you aren't, a writer for 12 magazines, like just having those relationships, knowing the people involved in those really, really well, and being able to call them up and send them a text and say, "Hey, check out my Kickstarter."
Oh yeah, my advice to anyone running a Kickstarter: make sure you get all your press contacts built up 3 months before you launch the Kickstarter.
Excellent, excellent advice.
Because when I was running this, I couldn't get anyone to cover my game until VentureBeat did an article on me. After that, the article started streaming in, but it was a stream whereas if I had prepped ahead of time, and given the appropriate 3 months of warming up press contacts, building up the narrative, of giving people time to promote things because sometimes it takes months for an article to actually come out.
Yeah, it's the launch of your Kickstarter can't be the beginning. It's got to be, the milestone after months and months of work.
And yeah, that's all necessary work that's really easy to take for granted.
Very, very cool. Thank you so much for coming in and sharing your story. We always like to wrap up the show talking about games played lately.
Well, a shameless plug, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
You can buy Throw Trucks with your mind from throwtrucks.com.
Oh, no, absolutely. We'll go over links too, but throwtrucks.com, absolutely got to go to that. But before we get to those plugs and wrap up the show completely, I want to talk about games played. I've been replaying Diablo 3, and I haven't just been replaying it, I've been playing it in Spanish because I'm trying to learn Spanish and get better at it. And I decided, oh man, why don't I just change the language mode for a game, and then I'll be completely lost and I won't know what any of the stuff is because I get an item and there's all of these words that I don't understand yet. And maybe, I'm learning different aspects of Spanish and what, the word for damage is and loot and experience. But it's just a good way to get exposure and have Spanish spoken around me, even if I can't be in a social situation where it's constantly being spoken around me. So that is one of the ways I've been spending my evenings. The other
awesome.
game I wanted to give a shout out to was at GDC. I played a board game called One Night Werewolf. Have you ever played Werewolves or Mafia? Or
I
any of those?
have. I heard about that game, and when it was described to me, it sounded like the stupidest thing I'd ever heard of. But I played it, and it's amazing.
It's so much fun. The one night version is literally one night. And, someone who's played Werewolves before, they think, well, how can that game possibly work? It's about going night to night to night and eliminating people slowly. And suddenly, when you just remove all the stakes and say, this is the only night, you only have one lynching, find the one werewolf or else, that changes the dynamic completely. People are like talking about, oh, I'm this person, I'm that role. And they're lying and bluffing, and it's a really interesting dynamic situation.
I had one game of that where I was the minion, and my goal is to either or cause the townspeople to be lynched or be myself lynched to make the werewolves win, and someone switched roles with me.
Yeah, that's a whole other aspect where they have these swapping things, so you're not 100% sure who you are. And there's a character called the Insomniac, who all of their special ability is they get to look at their card after all of the switching, so they know who they are, if they're still the Insomniac or not.
Yeah, and in that one game, look of terror on the werewolf's face is where I realized that I was no longer the minion.
Oh, that sounds awesome. Man, I just ordered it myself. It hasn't arrived yet, but I'm very excited to get some groups together and play that.
It's an amazing game. Play it.
So what about yourself? Anything you've been playing lately?
Well, actually, because a lot of my stuff was in storage, I had not been playing very many games. I recently got my stuff out of storage, and I've been chugging along on Borderlands 2, which has been fantastic. Like, Handsome Jack is a wonderful villain. And before that, The Binding of Isaac, which is possibly the most messed up game I've ever played in my life. But a really well-designed game. FTL and and I'm looking forward to Dust: An Elysium Tale, which has been recommended to me by a lot of people.
Good variety of games there.
That and Papers, Please.
Oh man, Papers, Please was one of my favorites of what year was that? 2013 or 2014?
I don't know. I missed it.
It was one of my favorites of that year. It came out. It was. I would highly recommend it. I think it was 2013. Might be crazy. But excellent. Those sound like great games. If you want to find more about the show, you can go to beindynow.com, get past episodes, show notes, cool stuff like that. You want to find out more about me, you can go to my blog, tobiahmarks.com, or follow me on Twitter at tobiahmarks. Now we can get in all the proper plugs for Throw Trucks and where we can find out more about you.
Oh, the game is for sale right now from throwtrucks.com. And it can also be purchased from the NeuroSky store at store.neurosky.com.
Awesome. Do you have a Twitter account?
Our Twitter handle and Facebook handle, and Tumblr handle are all Throw Trucks.
Very cool. Thank you again, Lat, for being on the show and telling us your story. Really, really appreciate it.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
For everyone else out there, go out and make some games.